Councillor Danny Purton, the Portfolio for the Environment, the subject of houses of multiple occupation, HMOs. Do you want to start as part of this piece about maybe what you would call some basic facts?
Yes, obviously we'd like to start off by recognising that HMOs as a tenure has a place in Harlow. There's always been a demand for particularly young single people who are starting out in jobs, finding somewhere cheap to live, commensurate with their pay, and obviously then later on they could move on. What's happened in Harlow has been quite extraordinary. Over the last 8 years, from 2012 to now, we've gone from a situation where there were 60 HMOs, 60 in 2012, we've now got over 320. People will be surprised at that number, but it's a fact, and unfortunately, and that's just not only a fact in itself, but compared to other places like Stevenage, far in excess of other towns similar to us, Stevenage and Basildon. And I think this is because landlords have seen Harlow as a place which they can easily get permission and licensing, mainly because we haven't had the resources to manage or to inspect. We're now going to change that, and we've come up with some new powers which we sort of knew that we had, but we couldn't really bring forward because we didn't have the means to enforce them. We've got a covenant which Harlow Development Corporation very wisely put on all houses in Harlow, that they should be for single family dwelling and they weren't to be used for commercial purposes. And that gives us a very powerful tool to ensure that we see HMOs as we think our community wants them. First of all, they need to be in the right place, not in the wrong place. Secondly, they need to be available for people who are working in Harlow or have got some family connection with Harlow. We don't want to become a dormitory town where people live here because it's cheap. And of course, we need to make sure the places themselves are up to a proper standard, the quality that we would expect for our people to live in.
So are you saying that in the future, supposing somebody has a 5-bedroom house, they make it into an HMO or they apply to get a licence, that would the plan say, for example, could be 5 people, the idea of 5 professionals from Public Health England are going to live there? If they will that application, 5 Public Health England not related to each other, it's a house covenant development corporation, does that mean they won't get a licence?
When you say they, you don't mean they, you mean the landlord, applying on behalf of starting up an HMO.
Yeah.
Yes, we as I said, we're going to have a 3-stage process. Is it in the right place or the wrong place for a start, in terms of the local, spatial setting? Secondly, can we be confident that the people who are going to be the tenants have got are either working in Harlow or have some family connection with the town? And thirdly, the actual quality of the accommodation, is it to the quality we would expect? And if all those things are satisfied, yes, we haven't actually refused any HMOs as of yet. What we have got is a pause while we make sure we've got watertight rules, conditions, so everybody knows what the process is and everybody knows the conditions that we will expect.
Have you had any meetings with landlords, or if not, why not?
We interact with landlords all the time in various ways. We obviously are put out for consultation the Article 4 directive, which is much more draconian set of conditions than the ones that we will be applying at the moment. People say, oh, well, why didn't you give some sort of period where, a transition period? Well, I ask you to imagine what would have happened during that transition period. If we had a transition period, we would have find we wouldn't have 320, we'd have considerable more, because we're aware that the pace of these HMOs coming into the town is accelerating. and we have had to introduce measures to try and get some sort of control over it. Not only the powers that we have, but also, as you're aware, in the council's budget that was approved last week, we have made provision for an inspector for the Environmental Health Department who will specifically be deployed for private housing and HMOs. And that will give us the resource we've always lacked to actually have powers and to be able to enforce them.
Because that's what residents seem to be saying. I know somebody in one particular townhouse street saying, one's great, you know, no problems, etc., what you would expect. The other one is become a real headache for us, with 6 people coming and going, etc., bonfires in the summer, you know, and not, they feel, you know, not interacting as a residential property should. What powers, if any, would that inspector have, you know, with people with neighbours and the HMO?
Well, of course, the question of HMOs being a nuisance to neighbours is already something that we can use the licence to affect. The landlords who've got the licence are required to properly manage and supervise their tenants' behaviour. In the past, we literally haven't had the resources to do that. We will now have the resources to do that, and are currently preparing all sorts of information database scripts that the new employee, when they arrive, which hopefully will be within the next couple of months, will be able to use to hit the ground running, so they'll straight away be able to get onto the case.
One of the landlords or companies that we spoke to a couple of days ago said they have 400 rooms, they only have 2 available, they work really well with streets to homes, and it almost came across as, why are you picking on us? Why are you almost, they're saying, could you in fact be making people homeless?
Well, the fact is that each HMO, whatever positive effect it has for the tenants, is also having a negative effect on our ability to have house families. There's an enormous waiting list. We've got an enormous waiting list for family homes every time an HMO conversion takes place. That's one less family home. And in a normal course of events, where there's a fairly stable number of HMOs, perhaps going up or down at different times, well, I'm sure everybody would be quite happy with that, but I'll repeat the figures. In 8 years, we've gone from 60 to 320, and there's no sign of that rate of HMO development slowing down, and unfortunately, we've got to call a halt to it unless we have, obviously, a very good case. The landlord has a very good case that they do manage their properties sufficiently well, that they do have tenants who've got, you know, legitimate reason for working here or got some family connection, and it's not in a place, as you say, where there's already problems, and this would exacerbate those problems.